And now for something completely serious.
The Minnesota killing fields, I repeated and scribbled until it picked its way and stagnated somewhere I can't point to anymore. Maybe my gut. Maybe there, in between my pancreas and large intestine, is the piddly brook of my soul. Renee Nicole. Good wrote those lines in 2020 in a prize-winning poem about dissecting fetal pigs in a biology class. She was wrestling with where life actually lives. Where the soul sits, if it sits anywhere at all. When you cut a body open and look at what's inside. It's the kind of question poets ask. Mortality. Meaning. What makes us more than meat and organs? On the morning of January 7th, 2026, an ICE agent named Jonathan Ross answered her question. He fired 3 bullets into her head through the driver's side window of her Honda Pilot as she tried to drive away from federal agents who had surrounded her vehicle on a residential Minneapolis street. The blood that pooled in the snow, Renee Good's blood, replaced philosophy with something colder and final. No soul to find. No transcendent meaning hidden inside the body. Just a 37-year-old mother of 3, shot in the head by her own government, while her partner watched from the passenger seat. Within hours, President Trump declared that video showed the woman had violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the ICE officer. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem called it an act of domestic terrorism. The woman who wrote poetry about faith and science, who won the Academy of American Poets Prize, who described herself as a poet and writer and wife and mom and shitty guitar strummer, became, in the official narrative of the United States government, a domestic terrorist who died trying to murder federal agents. But the video shows something else entirely. It shows ICE agents walking up to a stopped vehicle. It shows one agent yanking on her door handle and yelling at her to get out. It shows Good reverse slightly, then drive forward at what witnesses estimate was less than 5 miles per hour. It shows Agent Ross step to the side, clear of any danger, and fire 3 times into the side of her vehicle as it passes. It shows her lose control and crash into parked cars about 100 feet down the road. It shows her partner, covered in blood, screaming, "You guys just killed my wife." The video shows none of what Trump claimed. None of what Noem swore happened. None of the domestic terrorism that became the official story before Good's body was even cold. I'm 78 years old. I've watched a lot of presidents lie. I've seen a lot of government officials cover up a lot of crimes. But I have never seen anything quite like this. A killing captured on video from multiple angles. The video proving the government's story is false, and every single Republican of consequence rallying around the lie anyway. Not quietly, not reluctantly, loudly, proudly. J.D. Vance defended the shooter. Tom Emmer called local officials cowards for questioning the federal narrative. House Republicans held hearings supporting the administration's version of events. Fox News broadcast the lies without fact-checking, and Trump's base believed him over their own eyes. This is the "I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue" moment he predicted. Except it's not Trump pulling the trigger. It's his federal agents, operating with his explicit support, killing American citizens while he cheers them on and calls the victims terrorists. Who she was, Renee Good was born in Colorado Springs. She studied creative writing at Old Dominion University, where her work appeared in literary journals and where she won that poetry prize. She had been married twice. Her first husband gave her 2 children, now 15 and 12. Her second husband, Timmy Ray Macklin Jr., died in 2023 at age 36, leaving her with a 6-year-old son. She later met a woman, fell in love, took her partner's name, and moved with her new family to Minneapolis, just blocks from where she would die. Her mother, Donna Ganger, told reporters her daughter was one of the kindest people I've ever known. She was extremely compassionate. She's taken care of people all her life. She was loving, forgiving, and affectionate. When told the circumstances of her daughter's death, Ganger said simply, "That's so stupid. She was probably terrified." Good's neighbors described her as someone who invited people over for tea and cookies. She co-hosted a podcast with her late husband. She played guitar badly, by her own admission, but she played it. She wrote poems about faith and science and the places where they intersect. She raised 3 children largely on her own after becoming a widow at 34. On the morning she died, Good and her partner had just dropped their 6-year-old at school. They were in their neighborhood, a few blocks from home, when they encountered ICE agents conducting what the Department of Homeland Security called the largest immigration enforcement operation ever carried out. That 6-year-old is now, for all practical purposes, an orphan. His father is dead. His mother was shot in the head by a federal agent. His grandfather is traveling from out of state to try to figure out what happens to him now. Good's 15-year-old daughter and 12-year-old son from her first marriage have lost the mother who raised them after her first marriage ended. They've now lost 2 parents, their stepfather in 2023, their mother in 2026. Both deaths were sudden. Neither made any sense. Good's partner, whose name has been kept private, sat in the passenger seat and watched an ICE agent shoot the woman she loved. She was covered in Good's blood when she stumbled out of the crashed vehicle. Witnesses heard her screaming, "You guys just killed my wife, and I made her come down here. It's my fault." Video captured her sobbing. "They shot her in the head. I have a 6-year-old in school." This is what domestic terrorism looks like, according to the Trump administration. A poet, a mother, a widow rebuilding her life with a new partner, a woman who wrote about the soul and wondered where it lives and whether faith and science can coexist. What actually happened? The Department of Homeland Security had announced that 2,000 federal agents were being deployed to Minneapolis as part of the largest immigration enforcement operation ever carried out. This wasn't primarily about immigration enforcement. It was political theater triggered by a viral video. A 23-year-old conservative YouTuber named Nick Shirley posted a video on December 26, 2025, claiming he had uncovered massive fraud at Somali-run daycare centers in Minneapolis. The video showed Shirley visiting facilities that appeared closed or locked, trying to enter without permission, and taking those locked doors as proof of fraud. One center he featured had misspelled learning as leering on its sign, which Shirley treated as evidence of criminal activity. The video went viral. Elon Musk amplified it. J.D. Vance shared it. Within days, Trump had called Minnesota a hub of fraudulent money laundering activity and the Somali community garbage. The Department of Health and Human Services froze $185 million in federal child care funding to Minnesota, and DHS announced it was sending 2,000 agents to the Twin Cities. There was just one problem. Shirley's claims were false. Minnesota state investigators visited every center featured in his video. They found children present at all but one location, and that one wasn't open yet for the day when inspectors arrived. The centers had active licenses. They had been inspected within the previous 6 months. Some had safety violations. None had evidence of fraud. But by then, it didn't matter. The Trump administration had found its pretext for a massive show of force against the nation's largest Somali community, a community where 58% of Somalis were born in the United States, and 87% of foreign-born Somalis are naturalized citizens. On January 6, 2026, the day before Good was killed, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem was filmed in full tactical gear raiding buildings in St. Paul, surrounded by armed agents with Secret Service identification. House Republicans held hearings featuring Minnesota officials who supported the fraud narrative. The machinery of federal violence and political theater was in full operation. On the morning of January 7th, ICE agents in 2 vehicles approached Good's Honda Pilot, which was stopped in the middle of Portland Avenue between East 33rd and 34th Streets. According to witnesses, the vehicle had been sitting there for about 3 minutes. Some witnesses say Good was a trained legal observer monitoring ICE operations. Her mother says she wasn't involved in protests and was simply in her neighborhood. The truth is probably simpler. She was a resident who encountered federal agents operating in her community and got caught in what happened next. 4 ICE agents approached her vehicle. Video shows one agent, later identified as Jonathan Ross, yanking on the driver's side door handle while yelling at Good to get out. Another agent positioned himself near the front of the vehicle. Good's car reversed slightly. Witnesses describe her trying to turn around. Then she began moving forward, slowly. Witnesses estimate her speed at 5 miles per hour or less. Agent Ross, standing to the side of the vehicle, not in its path, drew his weapon and fired 3 shots through the driver's side window. Good was struck in the head. Her vehicle continued forward about 100 feet before crashing into parked cars. She was pronounced dead at Hennepin Healthcare shortly after. Video from multiple angles captured the shooting. None of it shows what federal officials claimed. None of it shows an officer being run over. None of it shows an imminent threat to anyone's life. What it shows is an agent shooting a slowly moving vehicle as it drives away from him. Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara, who reviewed the evidence, said Good was not the target of any law enforcement investigation or activity. Mayor Jacob Frey, who watched the video, said the federal narrative was bullshit and told ICE to get the fuck out of Minneapolis. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison said it was clear to me that the deadly force came as the driver was attempting to evade the officers. But within hours, President Trump was posting on Truth Social that the video showed Good had violently, willfully, and viciously ran over the ICE officer. When New York Times reporters confronted him with the fact that the video shows no such thing, Trump eventually conceded it's a terrible scene, but still insisted she ran him over. She didn't try to run him over. Let that sink in. The video clearly shows no officer was run over. The president was shown this evidence. He acknowledged it's a terrible scene. Then he maintained his lie anyway. The Republican response, rallying around the lie. This is where it gets instructive about the world we're living in. Every single prominent Republican, without exception, backed Trump's version of events. Vice President J.D. Vance said the officer deserves a debt of gratitude for his service. When asked if he still believed Good was trying to intentionally harm agents after watching the video, Vance softened slightly but claimed she was part of a left-wing network targeting ICE officers, a claim made without any evidence whatsoever. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem held a press conference defending the shooting as justified self-defense. She repeatedly claimed Good had weaponized her vehicle and attempted to ram multiple agents. When shown video evidence that contradicted her claims, she didn't back down. She called it an act of domestic terrorism and said the agent followed his training. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt blamed a larger, sinister left-wing movement that has spread across our country. Attorney General Pam Bondi issued warnings to protesters. If you cross that red line, you will be arrested and prosecuted. Border Czar Tom Homan blamed hateful rhetoric and violent attacks against the men and women of ICE. House Majority Whip Tom Emmer attacked Minnesota officials. Tim Walz and Jacob Frey are cowards who are inciting violence to distract from their own failures. Republican representative after Republican representative lined up to defend federal agents and attack local officials who questioned the narrative. Not one prominent Republican, not one, said what the video clearly shows, that the federal government's story is false. Not one called for an independent investigation. Not one suggested that maybe shooting an unarmed woman in the head as she slowly drives away might not be justified. And Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Complete silence. The man third in line for the presidency said absolutely nothing, while a U.S. citizen was killed by federal agents based on a false narrative that his party was actively promoting. Fox News and right-wing media immediately adopted the administration's story without bothering to fact-check it against the available video. They ran headlines about a woman trying to run over federal officers. They featured pundits explaining why deadly force was justified. They showed the video in slow motion while narrators explained what viewers should see, which bore no resemblance to what the video actually showed. And Trump's base. They believed him. Despite the video. Despite witness testimony, despite local officials from both parties saying the federal story is false. They believe Trump because Trump said it, and no amount of evidence matters when Trump tells them what reality is. This is the actual Fifth Avenue moment. Trump didn't literally shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, but his administration killed a U.S. citizen on a Minneapolis street, on video, and then lied about what the video shows. And every Republican with any power immediately backed the lie. Congressional leadership stayed silent. Right-wing media spread the lie. And the MAGA base accepted the lie as truth. If this doesn't cost Trump support, and it won't, then nothing will. If Republicans won't break with Trump over federal agents killing a citizen while the president lies about video evidence, they'll never break with him over anything. The shooter. The ICE agent who killed Renee Good is Jonathan Ross, 43, based out of ICE's field office in St. Paul. He's been with the agency since at least 2016. He previously served in Iraq, according to photos posted by family members showing him carrying an assault weapon. On June 17, 2025, about 7 months before he shot Good, Ross was dragged more than 100 yards by a vehicle driven by Roberto Carlos Munoz Guatemala during an arrest attempt in Bloomington, Minnesota. Ross got his arm caught in the window as the driver fled. He was dragged down the street, fired his taser twice without stopping the vehicle, and finally broke free. He required more than 50 stitches, 20 in his right arm, 13 in his left hand, and more for facial lacerations. Munoz Guatemala, who had previously been convicted of repeatedly sexually abusing a minor, was later convicted by a federal jury of assaulting a federal officer with a dangerous weapon. J.D. Vance referenced this incident when defending Ross, suggesting the agent might have been a little bit sensitive about vehicles after being dragged and injured. This is meant to excuse what Ross did, to explain why an agent might fire at a slowly moving vehicle even when he's not in danger. But here's what that actually tells us. ICE knew Ross had been traumatized by a vehicle-related incident. They knew he might have heightened fear responses around vehicles. They knew he carried that trauma into subsequent operations. And they sent him into the field anyway, without adequate evaluation, without sufficient recovery time, without consideration of whether his previous trauma made him unsuitable for situations involving vehicles. Then when Ross shot an unarmed woman in the head under circumstances that don't justify deadly force, the administration defended his actions by citing the very trauma they should have addressed before putting him back in the field. Ross won't be charged. He won't be disciplined. J.D. Vance says he deserves gratitude for his service. He'll continue working as an ICE agent, carrying a weapon, making life and death decisions about American citizens and immigrants alike. And the next time he shoots someone, the administration will defend him again. The investigation that isn't initially Minnesota's Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the BCA, was assigned to investigate Good's death jointly with the FBI. The BCA has a specialized force investigations unit created in 2020 specifically to provide independent, transparent investigation of use-of-force incidents by law enforcement. They responded promptly to the scene and began coordinating with federal authorities. Then that afternoon, the FBI informed the BCA that the U.S. Attorney's Office had reversed course. The investigation would be led solely by the FBI. The BCA would no longer have access to case materials, scene evidence, or investigative interviews necessary to complete a thorough investigation. BCA Superintendent Drew Evans released a statement. Without complete access to the evidence, witnesses, and information collected, we cannot meet the investigative standards that Minnesota law and the public demands. As a result, the BCA has reluctantly withdrawn from the investigation. Governor Tim Walz was blunt about what this means. It feels very, very difficult that we will get a fair outcome. And I say that only because people in positions of power have already passed judgment, from the president to the vice president to Kristi Noem, have stood and told you things that are verifiable, false, verifiably inaccurate. Think about what this means. The Trump administration has already publicly declared the shooting justified. The president has already labeled Good a domestic terrorist. The vice president has already defended the shooter. The Homeland Security Secretary has already called it self-defense. Now the administration's Justice Department, headed by Trump appointees who serve at Trump's pleasure, will investigate whether Trump's ICE agent was justified in killing someone Trump has already said deserved to be killed. This isn't an investigation. It's a formality before the inevitable exoneration. State prosecutors could theoretically file charges, but they've been cut off from the evidence. They weren't at the crime scene. They can't interview witnesses. They don't have access to the FBI's findings. Minnesota's public safety commissioner said it would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to proceed without federal cooperation. Even if state prosecutors somehow managed to charge Ross, they'd face the supremacy clause, the constitutional provision that federal law supersedes state law. Federal agents have argued, with mixed success, that states can't prosecute them for actions taken in their official capacity. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche has already declared that arrests of federal officers performing their duties would be illegal and futile. And if somehow, miraculously, charges were filed and the case went forward, Ross would claim qualified immunity. The legal standard is absurd. Prosecutors would have to prove not just that Ross violated Good's constitutional rights, but that he violated a clearly established right that any reasonable officer would have known about. Since there's probably no prior case with exactly these facts, an ICE agent shooting a slowly moving vehicle that's driving away from him, Ross could argue that he didn't know it was illegal. Civil lawsuits face the same qualified immunity barrier. Good's family could sue, but Ross would claim he acted reasonably under the circumstances. He'd point to his prior trauma. He'd claim he feared for his life. He'd argue that Good's vehicle was a deadly weapon. And unless the family can find a prior case with nearly identical facts where a court held that such conduct was unconstitutional, Ross walks away. The pattern is clear. A federal investigation controlled by the administration that has already declared the killing justified. A state investigation blocked from accessing evidence. Criminal prosecution nearly impossible due to qualified immunity and federal supremacy claims. Civil litigation facing the same qualified immunity wall. Jonathan Ross will face no consequences for killing Renee Good. This has happened before. It will happen again. In October 2025, just 3 months before Good was killed, a Border Patrol agent shot Marimar Martinez 5 times in Chicago under nearly identical circumstances. Federal officials immediately labeled Martinez a domestic terrorist who had ambushed and rammed agents with her vehicle. She was charged with assaulting a federal officer, facing up to 20 years in prison. Then security camera footage and body camera video emerged. The videos showed something very different. A Border Patrol agent steering his vehicle into Martinez's truck. Not the other way around. Federal prosecutors were forced to dismiss all charges before trial. No one was held accountable for the false charges. No one was disciplined for the false domestic terrorist label. No one faced consequences for trying to send an innocent woman to prison for 20 years based on lies. The lesson federal agents learned from the Martinez case. You can lie about vehicle incidents. You can shoot people and claim they tried to ram you. Even if video proves you're lying, even if prosecutors have to drop charges, nothing will happen to you. 3 months later, Jonathan Ross put that lesson into practice in Minneapolis. The broader lesson is even darker. Trump has created a federal law enforcement apparatus that operates with impunity. ICE agents can conduct military-style operations in American cities. They can kill American citizens. The administration will immediately back whatever story the agents tell. Congressional Republicans will defend them. Right-wing media will spread the lies. State and local officials who object will be attacked as terrorist sympathizers. And the MAGA base will believe whatever Trump says happened. This isn't a justice system. It's not even a functional law enforcement apparatus. It's organized violence backed by a propaganda machine, operating without democratic accountability, deployed for political purposes against communities the administration wants to terrorize. Good was killed as part of the largest immigration enforcement operation ever carried out, an operation triggered by a debunked YouTube video targeting Somalis. The administration has made clear that immigration enforcement is the vehicle for broader authoritarian control. They're using immigration as the pretext to put armed federal agents on the streets of American cities, conducting military-style operations with no meaningful oversight and no consequences when they kill citizens. And it's working. After Good was killed, did ICE pull back from Minneapolis? No. Did they review their use of force policies? No. Did they put Ross on leave pending investigation? Not that we know of. Instead, Kristi Noem held press conferences defending the killing. Federal agents continued operations. When protesters gathered, federal agents deployed tear gas and pepper balls, detained demonstrators, and showed up at Roosevelt High School where they pepper-sprayed students and handcuffed staff members. The killing of Renee Good didn't slow down federal operations in Minneapolis. It escalated them. Because that's how authoritarianism works. Violence isn't a mistake to be corrected. It's a feature to be repeated. The point is to terrorize communities into compliance. The point is to show that federal agents can kill citizens without consequence. The point is to demonstrate that even when the lies are obvious, even when the video contradicts the official story, nothing will happen because the people with power will back the people with guns. The system that makes this possible. I keep coming back to something that bothers me about how we talk about moments like this. We treat them as aberrations, as tragedies caused by individual failures that can be fixed with better training or new policies or reformed procedures. But Renee Good's death wasn't an aberration. It was the system working exactly as it's designed to work. Federal use of force policies explicitly prohibit shooting at moving vehicles unless the occupant presents an imminent threat of deadly force beyond the vehicle itself, and unless no other reasonable option exists, including, and this is in the actual policy, moving out of the path of the vehicle. The Department of Justice guidance says the same thing. These policies exist because law enforcement experts determined decades ago that shooting at moving vehicles is one of the most dangerous uses of force, creating severe risks to bystanders and to the driver who might lose control. Jonathan Ross violated federal policy when he shot Renee Good. The policy required him to move out of the way. He did move out of the way. Then he shot her anyway. This isn't a case of unclear guidelines. The policy is explicit. He broke it, and nothing will happen to him because the system is designed to protect federal agents who break the rules. Qualified immunity shields agents unless they violate clearly established rights, a standard so narrow that agents can shoot people and claim immunity because no prior case had exactly the same facts. The Supremacy Clause makes it nearly impossible for states to prosecute federal agents. The Justice Department can't fairly investigate incidents when the president has already declared them justified, and the FBI now blocks state investigators from accessing evidence. This isn't a system with some flaws that need fixing. This is a system deliberately constructed to ensure federal agents face no accountability for constitutional violations. The Republican Party has spent decades building this system. They've appointed judges who expand qualified immunity. They've blocked legislation that would create accountability. They've attacked prosecutors who try to hold federal agents responsible. They've labeled anyone who questions federal authority as anti-law enforcement. They've built a right-wing media ecosystem that reflexively defends federal agents regardless of evidence. And now they've elected a president who openly encourages federal violence, who pardons agents who commit crimes, who attacks local officials who try to hold federal agents accountable, and who has made clear that loyalty to him is more important than following the law. When Trump's ICE agents kill someone, congressional Republicans don't demand accountability. They don't call hearings to investigate. They don't propose reforms. Instead, they attack the victims and defend the agents. Tom Emmer calls local officials cowards for questioning the federal narrative. House Republicans hold hearings supporting the administration's lies. Mike Johnson stays silent, which is the same as endorsement. This is what Republican governance looks like in 2026. Federal agents can kill a citizen on video. The video can prove the official story is false. And every Republican with power will back the lie because maintaining power requires backing federal violence and preventing accountability. The Democratic response: speeches, press conferences, statements calling for investigations that everyone knows won't happen. It's not that Democrats don't care. They clearly do. It's that they're operating as if normal democratic processes still function, as if investigations will proceed fairly, as if oversight mechanisms still exist, as if the rule of law still applies. None of that is true anymore. The Republican Party has built an authoritarian infrastructure where federal agents operate above the law, where violence against civilians is encouraged and defended, where evidence doesn't matter when Trump declares what reality is, and where congressional oversight has been replaced with congressional cheerleading. Renee Good is dead because this system killed her. Not just Jonathan Ross, not just ICE. The entire structure of federal immunity, congressional complicity, partisan media, and authoritarian governance that makes it possible for federal agents to kill citizens without consequence. The world we're living in, Renee Good's 6-year-old son doesn't understand why his mother isn't coming home. Her 12-year-old son and 15-year-old daughter just lost their second parent in 3 years. Her partner watched her die and will carry that trauma forever. Her mother learned her daughter was killed, and within hours heard the President of the United States call her daughter a terrorist. This is the human cost of authoritarianism, not abstract principles about separation of powers or constitutional norms. Actual children without a mother, actual families destroyed, actual blood in the snow. And the people responsible, Trump, Noem, Vance, Ross, every Republican who backed the lies, they're sleeping fine tonight. They face no consequences. They'll do it again. I've been writing about politics and trying to make sense of American government for a long time. I've seen a lot of terrible things done by people in power. I've watched politicians lie and officials cover up crimes, and the system fail to deliver justice. But I've never seen anything quite like this. The brazenness of the lies. The speed with which an entire political party rallied around a false narrative. The way video evidence of a killing was simply ignored in favor of whatever story the administration wanted to tell. The complete absence of any Republican willing to say, wait, maybe we shouldn't call a dead woman a terrorist when the video clearly shows she wasn't trying to hurt anyone. This is Trump's "I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue" promise made real. His agents do the shooting. His officials do the lying. His party does the backing. His media does the spreading. His base does the believing. And American citizens die while being labeled terrorists for the crime of inconveniencing federal operations. There's no reform agenda that fixes this. There's no policy proposal that addresses it. There's no electoral strategy that solves it. The Republican Party has decided that authoritarian governance is preferable to democratic accountability, that federal violence is acceptable if it's directed at the right targets, and that evidence doesn't matter when maintaining power requires believing lies. Jonathan Ross will never be charged. He'll keep his job. He'll shoot again. And when he does, the same Republicans will defend him with the same lies while Democrats issue the same statements calling for investigations that won't happen. This is the world we're living in. Federal agents can kill citizens. Presidents can lie about it. Political parties can back the lies. And there's no mechanism to stop any of it because the people with the power to stop it benefit from it continuing. Renee Good wrote poetry about where the soul lives, about whether faith and science can coexist, about the meaning we find in examining mortality. Now she's gone, killed by her own government, labeled a terrorist by her own president. And the only thing that matters is this: nobody will face consequences for killing her. Not the agent who pulled the trigger, not the administration that backed the lies, not the Republicans who spread them. Not the media that amplified them, not the system that made it inevitable. This will happen again, soon, to someone else, in another city, with another set of lies, with the same lack of accountability. And we'll watch it happen because we're powerless to stop it. That's the truth. It's uncomfortable, it's enraging, it's heartbreaking, but it's true. The blood in the Minneapolis snow has melted. Renee Good is being buried. Her children are trying to understand a world without their mother. And the people who killed her are already moving on to their next operation, their next victim, their next lie. This is America in 2026. This is what we've become. And there's no hopeful note to end on, no reform agenda to propose, no call to action that will change it. Because the people with the power to change it are the same people who benefit from it staying exactly as it is.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.